The SCT Instant scheme is now an optional scheme in the SEPA area, but it will become mandatory in the near future. What does it exactly mean? It is an exciting topic and we hear a lot about it these days. I want to take this opportunity to clarify a few points about mandatory and optional schemes in the SEPA area. Currently, there are 2 mandatory schemes and 3 optional schemes in the SEPA area. The mandatory schemes are the SEPA Credit Transfer Scheme or Standard SCT scheme that went live on January 28, 2008. The second mandatory scheme is the SEPA Direct Debit Core scheme that went live on November 2nd, 2009. The optional schemes are the SEPA Instant Credit Transfer or SCT Ins scheme that has been live since 21st November 2017. The SEPA Direct Debit Business to Business scheme that went live on November 2nd, 2009. And finally, the One Leg Out Instant Credit Transfer scheme that went live last November 2023. Now, what is the difference between a mandatory and an optional scheme in the SEPA area? A mandatory scheme is a scheme that a payment service provider must offer. But there is a subtlety here. The SEPA Credit Transfer Scheme is mandatory for a payment service provider only if that PSP offers credit transfer services. And the SEPA Direct Debit Core Scheme is mandatory for a PSP only if that PSP offers direct debit services. In other words, if a PSP does not offer credit transfer services, there is no obligation for him to join the SEPA Credit Transfer Scheme. Or if a PSP does not offer direct debit services, then there is no obligation for him to join the SEPA Direct Debit Core Scheme. Contrary to what many people think, 2 mandatory schemes in SEPA does not mean that each PSP must join the 2 schemes. If a PSP does not offer direct debit services, it does not have to join the SEPA Direct Debit Core scheme, even if it is a mandatory scheme. Now, let's consider an optional scheme like the SEPA Instant Credit Transfer Scheme. That scheme enables the transfer of up to 100,000 euros in less than 10 seconds in the whole SEPA area. It was, and up to this day, an optional scheme for payment service providers. It means that payment service providers that offer credit transfer services do not have the obligation to join or participate in the SCT Instant scheme. They have the obligation to become participant in the standard SCT only. So, payment service providers that offer credit transfer services in the SEPA area may offer SEPA Instant Credit Transfer services or not. At least that is the case today. It is the choice of the PSP to join the SCT Instant scheme. But things will change in the near future, highly probably next year in 2025. The regulation will make SEPA instant payments also mandatory within the SEPA area. After the regulation is in force, payment service providers which provide standard SEPA credit transfers in euro will also be required to offer the service of sending and receiving instant payments in euro. And the charges that apply to instant transfers must not be higher than the charges that apply for standard credit transfers. After the regulation is in force in 2025, very probably, instant payments will become the new normal in all the SEPA area. PSPs that offer credit transfer services will have to implement both the standard SCT and the SEPA Instant Credit Transfer to comply with the regulations. For direct debits, the logic is the same. The SEPA Direct Debit B2B scheme is an optional scheme. Payment service providers do not have to become participants to the SEPA, to the SDD B2B scheme, even if they offer direct debit services. They must join the SDD core scheme as participants since it is mandatory. But they may choose to join the SDD B2B scheme or not because it is an optional scheme. Now, the difference between mandatory and optional schemes in SEPA must be crystal clear for you. Leave a comment below in case you have questions. See you next time.